Hello and welcome to this course where we would start exploring how to add our very first roles and features to the Server 2019, which is Active Directory. So in the previous video, we explored the theoretical components of Active Directory, and now we need to do the practicals. From a system administrator point of view, you need to know how this was set up so you can better answer interview questions and know where things are when you want to resolve queries related to Active Directory. So I have the server running at the moment, and we are going to open the server manager. And what we want to do is we want to run add-in roles and features. Now, before we do that, we didn't configure any DNS address for Ethernet adapter. So what we'll do is we'll just get that done now, which is this one, because we kind of need it for whatever we are setting up. So the default gateway I would be given for this would be say 192.168.1.2.254, and I'll give it a DNS address of, so it could be anything because this is internal. Say I'll give it 1.1.1.1 and on alternative 1.0. That one. I'll click OK. We'll close. So at least we have a DNS address. But this might be converted after we set up the DNS. So when you want to install Active Directory for the very first time, what you want to do is you open the server manager and you go to tools. So you go to manage. The server's running too slow, not sure why, but let's give it a few seconds. So what we want to do is we want to add roles and features by either clicking here or going to manage and going to add roles and features. And this is the wizard that enables you to add various services that you want to be running on any particular server. So before you begin, this is the default information that you might want to read. Just click next. And the installation type is always role-based or feature-based installation. Click next. And we are installing this on this server. And you can see I have the server name and the IP address for the server. So what I'll do is I'll click next. And this is where we select the services that we want to set up. So what we want to go for is Active Directory Domain Services. And this normally comes with this added features, which are required for their whole Active Directory service to run. So we just include it by default. And then we would go for a DNS server as well. And we would also include its additional features. So that's all for now. On other courses, normally they'll add DHCP, which I might do in this course, but for now we're just only focusing on Active Directory Domain Services and DNS server. So we need a DNS server because we need to configure it so that other devices within the network can resolve queries onto the server. So like for instance, if someone wants to join the computer to this domain, you'd need to have the DNS set up in a way that the computer can join the domain. So the server can resolve anyone that's querying it to join the domain. So with this ticked and this ticked, we'll click next. And this is basically default. We are not really going to do anything here. I'll just click next. This is to do with Azure Active Directory. This is something that we'll do in another video when we are linking the server to Office 365 Online, where we can have a sync between the server and Office. So if you create a user in Active Directory, it will appear in Azure Active Directory. So I just click next, and this is just information. And this is the DNS server information that you need to note. And I'll just click next. And this is the confirmation of all the stuff that you're setting up. So just click install. And this normally takes a few seconds. I know it takes a good while. So I'm just going to go back to viewing this. Okay, so yeah, it normally takes a good few minutes, and when it's done, we'll move on to the next stage. So the installation is complete now, and what we need to do is we need to complete the installation. So I'll just click close, and normally you would be triggered through these notifications, and this is why we can complete all the necessary tasks that are needed to get all the services that we just installed to work. Now, this is where we have to now promote this server to be a domain controller. That's because Active Directory services is running on this machine, and it's going to be the authoritative server that will be authenticating anything to do with user queries, user accounts and passwords and stuff like that. So when you're asked how do you promote a server to be a domain controller, this is the answer that you give. Normally when you set it up, you have the option to promote the server to be a domain controller during the installation stage. So I'll just click this now. And once you allow that, then it brings you into the Active Directory deployment wizard. So normally, if it's a whole new install, you would normally go for add a new first, and then adding a new first means you're setting up your whole new domain. So we remember we said domain is a collection, like a group of network devices that are managed together, like a whole forest. Since it's a new installation, I will go to add a new forest, and obviously you go for the other ones if you suit, and we will call this what we prefer. So normally the naming convention for domains would be maybe the company.local or whatever purpose.local or .com or whatever. I will stick to the traditional naming convention. So say this domain, will call it extratia.local. So we'll call this as this is going to be our domain for Active Directory for us. So I'll click next. And you'll be asked what's your forest functional level. Normally you'd keep this as the highest available. So we are using 2019, so the highest available is 2016. So we'll keep this as it is. And then we have to set up a password. I would go with a default password that I normally use. And then I'll click next. We'll leave all these as normal. A delegation of DS, yeah, so we have to create a DNS delegation. Which, if there was a delegation that was available already, we could have just chosen it. But with a DNS configuration, we would set that up manually, and we can only do that after it had recognized that this is the authoritative server, because it needs to be authoritative server. It needs to be a domain controller to be able to be resolving queries. So we just leave this as it is and we'll click next. And the NetBIOS domain name, normally it would just default to whatever you chose your local domain name to be. So we're just waiting for that to pick it up. Yep, so I'll keep it as it is, Extratia, and click next. Normally take a few seconds. Yep, and this is a path for anything to do with database folder, log files and stuff like that, if you want to keep that in mind. I'll just leave these as default. You're not changing anything, just click next. And this is a confirmation of all the stuff that we've already ticked yes and no for, the answers we gave. And if you want to keep this as, if you want to have a script version of this so that next time you're building a new server or you're configuring a new Active Directory, you can basically just use a script. So you can use this view script and copy and save it somewhere. But we're not doing that. We'll just click next. And then the installation should be in progress. That also would take a few seconds. So it's verifying the prerequisites to see, do we have enough resources on this machine that it needs to give it all that we're trying to install. So we'll give it a few seconds. So the installation is complete. The prerequisite check passed successfully. So now we can continue with the install. All these are normal default warnings that you need to know, but we'll just ignore them and click install, which also might take a few seconds. Installation is successful, and we're about to be signed out because the server has now been promoted to a domain controller. So it's now a domain on its own, and it just needs to shut down to get the changes to apply. So you realize that it's going to now show as a domain joined operating system and not just a workstation. So we'll double check that in a few seconds when it comes back up. It's applying computer settings. It's actually nearly there. So it has now updated all the applications that we have set up. It has installed all the necessary changes that we've made by promoting it to a domain controller. So if you're just going to log in now, you'd realize a new difference. So now you'd see that it's no longer asking just administrator. It's now saying domain / administrator. So this shows that this is now a domain controller. And somewhat is now domain joined. It joined itself to its own domain. That's how I can explain it anyway. So this administrator is the same local administrator account that we had that has now been converted into a domain administrator. So I would just put in same password. And now we are going to go into the server now. So now we have booted ourselves into the server as now a server that is a domain controller. So one other thing that we need to just double check and wait for the services to run. So at the left pane now we have the local server, and we have the DNS, we have the Active Directory, and the Active Directory is now installed. And let's see if there are any notifications left to do. No, so everything is kind of set up. So one last thing that we just need to double check, and first we just need to confirm if we are actually on a domain. So one quick check you can do is go to the command prompt, and then there's this command called who am I? I am /administrator. Okay. So since Active Directory has now been installed, so do you remember the key components we talked about in the theory? So what are some of those tools? So you go to your start menu, and we now have Windows administrative tools, and in that we have Active Directory Center, we have Active Directory users and computers. So when I go into this is basically Active Directory users and computers, ADUC, user control. And this is our first. If I break down the tree, we have some standard OUs and groups and files and users and objects that have been already created after the installation. So when I go to users, we have the administrator account, and we have all this inbuilt system build accounts that the server needs or Active Directory needs to be able to run the services. And we have a default group for computers. So when you join any computers to Active Directory or through the domain, they would appear in this folder. So at the moment we don't have any. So we have users, and we have all these users. So if you want to create a new user, you can basically just go to, you right click on user, you go to new, and you go to user, and then you create a name and set a password and stuff like that. We are not exploring that yet. We're just seeing how to get the installation done. And one other thing we need to just double check is the DNS. So we have the DNS snap-in. So you can go to the server and you can go to tools. Before we go to tools, let's just go to the DNS config at the moment. So this is the IP address that's given. That's currently this is what is registering as an IP address now. We just need to just see how to visit the DNS snap-in console as well. So when you go to tools, you can go to DNS, or you can actually just go to start and go to DNS. It's an app. That's a snap-in. Anyway, I'll go to tools, go to DNS, and at the moment, we need to just double check what changes has happened to our network when we set up the DNS. So I'll just go to the local server again, and I'll click on our Ethernet adapter, and we would go to properties, and I'll go to IPv4, and now it has this default DNS that it has set up. We'll leave this after this. We just need to double check if what are some of the DNS addresses that we can use to configure on devices when we want to be able to join those machines to the domain. So I'll come with this, and I'll go back to the DNS snapping. If you right click this and you go to forward lookup zones, and you go to this is the forward lookup zones. So we just need to double check. If you go to this one and you go to, basically we want to look at some of their forward addresses, and I'll just give you that in a minute. So we just want to see what are some of the properties of the DNS. So you go to the DC01, which is the server, right click, go to properties, and these are the interfaces. So these are the IP addresses. So select IP addresses that will serve DNS requests. So the server can listen for DNS queries on all IP addresses defined for this computer, or you can limit to that. So we're just taking note of these IP addresses and forwarders. So forwarders are DNS servers that the server can use to resolve DNS queries. This is just bear in mind. So assuming you wanted to add additional IP addresses, you can use it to edit, and you can manually just click here to add. And basically that's how you go about managing DNS addresses for your forest. So we just keep this in mind. I'm just going to take a snip of this. Anyway, so that's our DNS snapping, and what we want to do now is to see if we can join the Windows 11 workstation to the domain. So we see how the DNS resolves it, because now they can talk to each other, and now we have a proper Active Directory configured. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll attempt that. Thanks.